Okay, so we've all heard the term standardized test, right? But what does that really mean? Let's break it down and take a look at what makes these tests such a huge deal, and honestly, so controversial in the world of education. Let's get right into it.
All right, so at its heart, a standardized test is all about one thing: consistency. It means everyone gets the same test under the same conditions, scored in the exact same way. This creates what you might call a level playing field. It means your score can be compared to anyone else's, no matter when or where they took the test.
So what are the key ingredients that make a standardized test, well, standardized? Let's zoom in on the core characteristics that define them. It really boils down to four main things. First, they're standards-based, which just means they're built to measure very specific skills. Second, they are a serious product of research and development. These tests go through a long, scientific process to make sure they're actually reliable. Third, you've got systematic scoring, which takes out the guesswork and makes sure everyone is graded by the same exact rules. And finally, they're referenced to norms. This means your score is compared to a huge group of people to see where you rank. Now, like pretty much any tool out there, standardized tests aren't perfect. They have some major upsides and some pretty significant downsides. This is a huge debate, so let's weigh both sides. Yeah, it's really a story of trade-offs. On one hand, they're super efficient. They're already made, they're validated, and you can score them for thousands of people in a snap. That makes them great for things like placing students into the right classes. But on the other hand, critics point out that they might not actually show what someone can do in the real world. They can also lead to teaching to the test, where learning gets narrowed down to just what's on the exam. And sometimes, the results can be easily misunderstood.
So, you might be wondering, how are these complex tests actually created? It's definitely not something that happens overnight. It's a very methodical, step-by-step process.
The whole thing breaks down into about 6 key steps. It starts with the big question: what is this test for? Then, developers create a detailed blueprint and start designing the actual questions. And this is crucial. Those questions are tested and evaluated for fairness and clarity before they ever get used. After they figure out the scoring, the last step is basically to keep studying the test to make sure it stays valid and effective. It's really a continuous cycle of improvement. Okay, let's talk about one of the biggest areas where you see standardized tests in action: measuring language proficiency. This is where their real-world impact becomes crystal clear. For millions of people around the globe, a language proficiency test is basically a gateway. Think about it. These scores are used for huge, life-changing decisions about who gets into a university, who can immigrate to a new country, or who gets a certain job. They're designed to give a single, reliable measure of a person's ability to communicate. And you've probably heard of some of the big ones, right? Like the TOEFL and, of course, the IELTS. But there are others too, like the PTE and MELAB. Each one is a super carefully designed tool meant to give an objective snapshot of someone's English skills. And this quote right here, it absolutely hits the nail on the head. Because these tests act as gatekeepers, they become high-stakes tests. The results can literally open doors or close them. That's a massive responsibility, and it's why for so many people, preparing for these exams with the right support is just so important. This video is brought to you by the IELTS Focus, an English center specializing in IELTS preparation. You can find them on Zallo at 08477059973.